In this lecture, we're going to be learning about color theory. So color theory is basically just the idea that certain colors in certain saturations and certain values look best together. So the first thing we're going to be learning about is about complementary colors, which is basically colors on the color wheel that are opposite from each other. These colors are complementary because they look really good together. So let's look at some examples. So right here you can see we have the color wheel, and over here we have an orange-red color, and straight across from it we have this blue color, kind of a turquoise color or teal. So that would be its complementary color. If we look at this purple right here, straight across from it, we have yellow, and that would be its complementary color, or vice versa. Yellow's complementary color would be purple because they're opposite from each other. So it's really simple to figure out what the complementary color is. And we want to try to implement this into our art. When we have complementary colors, it creates what's called contrast, color contrast. And that is really important for creating beautiful paintings, beautiful artwork, is anytime we can incorporate contrast, we want to. And that includes with color. But there's some rules that you want to follow. So first, let's have a look at an example of a painting done by someone that's pretty famous. You'll probably recognize this one. And you can see that it uses complementary colors. If we come back to our color wheel, you can see if we look at the blue's over here, directly across is orange, but not that far off is yellow. So complementary colors don't always have to be exactly across from each other. You just want them to be in this general area, or at least on the other side. So if we were to cut this in half, right down the middle. So I'm going to use my brush and just draw a line like that. If we were to cut it in half, you can see that basically anything on this side is going to look pretty good with anything on this side. So if we take a blue and we take a yellow, we can create a painting that looks pretty nice. It really pops to the eye. Now, this painting uses pretty saturated colors, and saturation, as you already know, basically just means how much color is in it or how little color is in it. So if we come over here into our color picker, the more we go over to the right, the more saturated it becomes. So we have completely saturated red over here. And if we come more over to the left, it turns white because that's the value. But if we even come down lower, you can see it goes into the grays all the way down into the black. So this is our value going up and down, and this is our saturation going from left to right. Right being the more saturated side. It has more color in it. And if we look at this, if we go ahead and color pick it actually, you can see that that yellow right there, it's more towards the saturated side of our color picker. And if we go ahead and we select this blue, you can see that it's also on the saturated side. So it's pretty saturated. So if you want to, you can create things that are very saturated, but most of the time, especially if you're going for something that looks a little bit more realistic, you want to have a lot of desaturated colors, meaning that they're going to be closer to this gray side. So let's go ahead and let's continue on. So when we're painting, there's another type of color scheme, which is called monochromatic. So monochromatic just means that it's all painted with the same color. It's just different values and different saturation levels. So you can see right here, we have this famous painting, the American Gothic painting, and I've turned it into a monochromatic painting because if you've seen this before, you know that there's a lot of colors in this painting, but I've turned it into just a red monochromatic painting, meaning that it's only been, the only colors in this are red. It's either a dark red or a light red or white or black. And it can be more saturated or more desaturated, but all of it is red. There's no other hues in here. And this is one way to paint. A good reason why you would want to try to do a painting like this is because you want to have an understanding of the values of a painting and how color and values both work with each other to create contrast. So let's go ahead and let's move on. So let's have a look at another example. So previously in the course, we painted this eye. And now I'm going to teach you a little bit about why I chose this color palette. Because I gave you a color palette to use and we only picked from these colors. But why did I choose these colors? Well, usually what you want to do when you're painting is you want to find one main color. And this main color is going to be your most saturated color, and it's typically going to be where you want your focal point to be. So in the case of this eye, the iris is the focal point, and it has this bright yellow in it. So it's not completely yellow and it's not super saturated, but it's the most saturated color in this entire painting. So if we go ahead and color pick that yellow, you'll see over here in our color tray that it's more towards the saturated side. And what I did is basically the further away I got from that main color. So if we look over here on our hue slider, the further away I got from this yellow, so if I start moving down into the reds or if I start moving up into the greens or the blues. So basically the opposite side of the color wheel, which is within this green and blue and purple area, all those colors get very desaturated the further away they got from my main color. So if yellow is my main color, then that means as I start to go down into my reds, it's going to slightly get a little bit more desaturated, not very much. And basically this loops back around to the top of our colors. So if we drag this back up to the top, we're still continuing on from that red down there. And as we continue on towards our purples, it becomes more desaturated. And as we continue on into our greens, it becomes more desaturated. And that's the way I wanted it, because I want to have my main color stand out from all the rest of them. And I also don't want the painting to be too busy or too vibrant for my viewer. So this is what you typically want to do. You want to find your main color, and then you want to also find your complementary color and try to include both those into your painting. But whatever your complementary color is, it's going to be more desaturated. So let's color pick this painting real quick so we can see this in real life. So our main color was this yellow, and we already saw that it's pretty saturated. And if we look at all these other variations of this yellow, this is basically a brown, it's close to the yellow, this is also another brown, and all of these, since they're in that same area, that orangish yellow area over here in our color hue slider, they're all still pretty saturated. Same with the skin tones, they stay pretty saturated. We started moving a little bit more into the middle rather than over here towards the right, but they're still relatively saturated. Same with this pink color right here. But once we start getting into colors like blue, so this blue that we used in the skin tone, it's very desaturated, as you can see over here in the color tray. It's almost all the way over to the left. Same with the color of the eye. It's almost completely desaturated. Same with these purple colors over here. This brownish purple color. They're more towards the desaturated side, because as we started moving away from our yellow into our blues and purples and stuff like that, we wanted to start getting more desaturated. All right, so now we have a project for this lecture where you're going to actually get to test out your knowledge on this. So right here, I have a Photoshop file that you can go ahead and download in the resources. And what it consists of is we have a white background and we have the layer of the drawing. Now what you need to do is you need to just go ahead, add a layer underneath the drawing, so it should be sandwiched between the background and the drawing. And then using your brush tool, you're just going to select colors, and I want you to basically paint this in like a coloring book. And the way you're going to do this, just to kind of help you out a little bit, is the first thing you want to do is decide what your main color is going to be. Now your main color is typically going to be the most saturated, like I said, and so it's typically going to be your focal point. And since this is a human, the focal point will most likely be her eyes. So I would choose the color of her eyes, make that the most saturated color, and then from there, go ahead and find your complementary color. So then you might make something like her hair the complementary color of her eyes. But you would want to make her hair a little bit more desaturated because it's the complementary color. And anything that gets close to that complementary color should be desaturated as well. So just real quick, let me give you an example. Let's say, for example, that we make her eyes green. So I'm going to go ahead and bring my color picker into the greens. And let's make it something like right about there. So it's more on the saturated side. I can go ahead and paint in her eyes like that. And now since we're using green, let's make her hair the complementary color. So if I come back here to my other file and I turn on my color wheel, and we look at green, here's our green, straight across from it is red or orange or purple, somewhere around there. So let's actually just go ahead and let's color pick this purplish color right here, reddish purple. Let's come back to our file and let's adjust this a little bit because that's really saturated. So what we want to do is let's drag this over, make it a lot more desaturated, and maybe we'll make it even, actually that's probably a good value. So that brightness right there is good. And we could paint her hair in that color. And now that we have the base for our main color and then our complementary color, which is desaturated, now based off of these two, we can start filling things in. So her skin tone, for example, we know since it's kind of far away from the green, or it's starting to get away from the green, we probably want that a little bit more desaturated. So we might want our skin tone to be something like this. Maybe we want that a little bit brighter. There we go. And if we incorporate any more green into here, we might not want them to be as saturated as the eyes, because we want the eyes to be the focal point. So if we use green again, let's say your shirt is going to be green, so we come back into the greens, we might want that to be a little bit more desaturated, even though that's the main color. And that's just to make sure that the eyes stay the focal point. All right, so go ahead and color this in however you want. Choose your main color, then choose your complementary color, and then desaturate that complementary color. And based off of those two colors, choose all your other colors accordingly. And once you're done, I want you to go ahead and save this out and post it to the Q&A section of the course so that we can all see your drawing. And if you want any feedback, go ahead and ask for feedback. Thanks for watching this lecture, and I'll see you guys in the next one.